People are crying tears of joy over India's little baby on the moon. Pictures that have captured millions of hearts all across the country, courtesy Isro. This is Pragyaan, viewer. People have been waiting since the landing of Vikram with bated breath for this little video clip that Isro has so generously shared with India and the world early this morning. India Today brings it to you in full. The Pragyaan rover that has come out from the Vikram lander is now fully on the surface of the moon. It's so beautiful to think about the tracks it has made on the moon, the Isro logo, the Ashoka statue. India's symbols are on the south pole of the moon, a place where no human and no human-made machine has ever ventured. These are big things that India has achieved, and India's little baby Pragyaan is out there and killing it. Take a look at this report.
You're watching history in motion. The Pragyaan, the Chandrayaan-3 rover coming out of the lunar lander Vikram and taking its first steps on the moon's soil. The images of India's moonwalk that began on Thursday were released by the Indian Space Research Organization on Friday. The movement from the rover down the ramp, while it appears quite easy, was made possible by a series of complex maneuvers.
No, this the particular video what has put is the rover on the surface of the moon. Now, it's first of all, it's a very complex process, and it is come out and is moving around on the surface of the moon. And now it will collect the scientific data, and that data will be sent to Earth for analysis by the scientists.
Isro has confirmed that all the systems of Chandrayaan-3 are working normally, and all experiments will be conducted on the lunar surface as per schedule. 3 lander module payloads along with ILSA, an instrument used to measure lunar seismic activity, have been turned on by Isro. A third payload, Rambha, which will study the atmosphere near the surface of the moon, is switched on. The Pragyaan rover is the first of its kind to be deployed to the moon's south pole. Over the next 14 Earth days, which equals 1 lunar day, Pragyaan will cover moon's surface at speeds as low as 1 centimeter per minute. It is equipped with a variety of instruments, including a camera, a spectrometer, and a magnetometer. The rover will conduct experiments to study the moon's surface, including its composition, mineralogy, and history. It will be powered by solar panels and will communicate with the lander Vikram. Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who is in Greece on a one-day visit, highlighted the success of Chandrayaan mission in his talks with the Greek president.
चंद्रयान-3 की सफलता दूसरे भारत की या भारत के विज्ञानों की सफलता ऐसा नहीं है। ये पूरी मानव जाति के लिए सफलता है। मैं मानता हूं कि उससे जो नतीजे निकलेंगे वो पूरी साइंटिफिक फैटर्निटी को और मानव जात को चंद्र के संबंध में जो उसकी जिज्ञासाएं हैं और लोग जो भावी प्लान कर रहे हैं उसमें बहुत उपयोगी हो सकता है।
The successful lunar landing will inspire more complex space missions by Isro. India aims to embark on her first mission to study the sun. Mission Aditya will launch in September. The moonwalk is only the beginning of many such endeavors. Bureau Report, India Today.
And Isro has also released this other little bit of video footage showing just what needed to happen on the Vikram lander for the Pragyaan rover to be able to make an exit and reach the lunar surface. All of this happening like clockwork, remote controlled from the ground by Isro's hero scientists. This is how it happened. It was basically like a trap door, a 2-segment trap door that needed to fold open and act like a ramp on the surface of the moon before the Pragyaan could then roll out. mechanical engineering marvel controlled from thousands and thousands and thousands of miles away on Earth in a control station in Bengaluru. That's where all this magic of science and engineering is taking place. So you've seen the video of the Pragyaan rover rolling down that ramp, and here's a video of how that ramp was actually deployed. I want to bring in India Today's Sagai Raj, who's with us live from Bengaluru. He's been at the Isro ever since the landing. India Today's Akshita was also there on that historic night. She also joins us. Akshita, quickly to you first. Lovely images of of that door opening, allowing little Pragyaan to get to where it's been dying to go, to the moon surface. Amazing to think of how all of this is controlled from so far away, and all of it happening so smoothly.
Very, very true, Shiv. And those images that we've got right now, I know we've all been waiting for it. This is a 26-kilo rover making its way down so smoothly, you'd think it weighs just about 4 to 5 kilos.
Yeah.
But essentially, you see the way the mechanics have worked out so perfectly since the launch to the landing to now. You're seeing how really Isro has thought it through so well that it's so craftfully done. There are 26 mechanisms before that actually has allowed the rover to come out in this smooth manner, Shiv. And all of that has been manufactured by Isro. This is something that, in fact, the Isro scientists have told me about. They say, everyone keeps asking us, how is it the Chandrayaan-3 costs so less and works so perfectly? It's because we've made everything from scratch. There's no question of buying from here, buying from there. Everything is done by us. So those 26 mechanisms, including the fact that it's going down that particular ramp that's put out by Vikram with those wheels, and then you've got it pushing through, going right down to the surface, all of that is made by Isro. It's an amazing feat. I know it doesn't look like much when you see that and you're just seeing some device rolling down, but imagine how much effort is really taken for this to be such a roaring success, Shiv.
It's incredible, and the engineering that's gone into it. It's a little dinky little thing. 26 kilos, 6 wheels, a tiny little soapbox kind of thing. It reminds me of the movie WALL-E, actually. And the fact that it's going to be doing some really incredible things that go way beyond how cute it is just how fascinating the story of the Pragyaan is. Sagai, you've been speaking to the team at Isro. You've spoken to the scientists who were part of the specific Pragyaan rover program as well. The 14 days has begun, Sagai. A very little time available to the Chandrayaan-3 program, and it is all systems go, or action stations for the Pragyaan, which over the next few days must do an entire plethora of experiments on the moon surface. Tell us about that.
Absolutely. 1 day of lunar is 14 days of the Earth, and that is the reason all the scientists are in full-fledged working and not even giving interviews to all the TV channels. We had approached all the Veeramuthuvel and Kalpana and everybody. They said that not for next 14 days. We are busy. We are going to check every single thing on the surface of the moon, whether it is soil, water, or whatever is available on the surface of the moon. And talking about this particular rover and lander ship, in 2019, much before the launch of Chandrayaan-2, we were the privileged ones from Bengaluru, where the Isro had taken to us to a factory where they made this rover and lander. And it was on the Martali Ring Road, and they had shown that how it functioned and what all the experiment which was being done in 2019. Yes, it was quite unfortunate. It was a failure, but the scientist, according to K7, who said that maybe we might have failed in Chandrayaan-2, but the scientists have never given up. They are robust. They are working hard, and they are very rugged. They'll definitely make it successful in Chandrayaan-3, and that's what they have done. And there are several experiments which was being done in the lab, in the factories, when they have manufactured this lander and rover. They have used lander. They have taken in a helicopter and thrown from a certain altitude to ensure that that lands safely. They have changed the mechanism. They changed the hardware. They have enhanced the software within the rover and lander. Now everything has yielded for them.
Incredible, incredible. The expectations, the weight of expectations on Pragyaan are high. It's not just Isro that's watching. It's not just Sagai, Akshita and I that are watching. It's the world. Space laboratories, astronomers, astrophysicists everywhere in the world are going to be counting on what baby Pragyaan is going to bring to them. And it's so lovely to think that it's just gone out there. It's alone on the surface. Of course, it has company from Vikram. I, for one, can't wait for Pragyaan to turn its camera around and send us that first picture of the entire Vikram lander on the surface of the moon as well. Akshita and Sagai, keep tracking that. I will come back to you. Thank you so much for that. I do want to play out that clip from BBC World News once again because it's important to understand how effortless racism can actually be. This is from 2019. It's not from the, from yesterday or this week even. It is from 4 years ago. In fact, the BBC has clarified since it's gone viral afresh right now. This is a clip where an anchor, and I don't want to prejudge it for you, just take a look at his body language, take a look at what he says.
Because some people will be thinking about this. India, a country that lacks a lot of infrastructure, a country that has extreme poverty. I think more than 700 million Indians don't have access to a toilet. Really? Should they really be spending this sort of money on a space program? So, you know, I'm going to have to ask you, because some people will be thinking about this. India, a country that lacks a lot of infrastructure, a country that has extreme poverty. I think more than 700 million Indians don't have access to a toilet. Really? Should they really be spending this sort of money on a space program? So, you know,
I wanted to bring in someone who I respect very much for his views on a variety of things, including strategic affairs, Pakistan, international affairs, but also someone who really calls a spade, especially on social media, especially when he sees things like this. And Sushant Sareen, who's a senior commentator, senior fellow of the Observer Research Foundation, has had a couple of things to say about this old clip that's going viral once again. And in many ways has become representative of how sections of not just niche media but mainstream Western media really regard achievements here in India. Sushant, welcome. Thank you for your time here on India Today. You've called it a colonial hangover, racism, something that doesn't deserve India's attention. India is busy with everything that keeps us busy. But I did want to throw some light on it, Sushant, specifically because this is the BBC. This is, the opposite end of niche media. This is as mainstream as it can possibly get.
Well, Shiv, thanks for having me. Look, it is there's a colonial hangover in the Brits that they think, we are their colonial slaves and they can talk down to us. But there's also a colonial hangover among many Indians that we have considered the BBC to be, some kind of God's voice itself, the voice of truth, which is far from the reality. The BBC is nothing but a tool of the British government, and it's a propaganda tool. It's always been. And honestly, it's not just the far right in Britain. It's the left and, these white racists who are all over the place in Britain, who have a similar attitude when it comes to India's accomplishments, and what have you. So I don't really distinguish much between the BBC. Look at the way some of their interviews, they think they're doing hard talk. They're not doing hard talk. They're actually trying to insult the people they're interviewing. And people with some amount of self-respect, people like Lee Kuan Yew, people like the Azerbaijani, I'm not a fan of the Azerbaijanis, but at least the way their president reacted to one of the BBC interviewers and called them out, I think that is the way you need to treat these people and put them in their place, rather than, treat them with this thing that, these are white folk talking to us, so we need to be, our typical colonial slave mentality. I don't think we need to do that anymore.
Because it's interesting you say that, Sushant, because people are triggered. These clips which are from 2019, including some of these new tweets, they've gone viral. People are angry. There's a great deal of outrage. I did a fact check yesterday. I don't know if you saw it, about this myth of UK aid coming to India, etc. So people still do feel very strongly about it. It's difficult to ignore.
It is difficult to ignore. Even more because, number one, I think a lot of Indians now, find it very galling when they hear this kind of a supercilious tone coming from some of these white folk, number one. Number two, their arrogance and their ignorance. And in fact, I did see your clip yesterday. And you know, the sheer ignorance which is reflected by the far right, even by the BBC, on how much aid they give. Number one, they don't give us any aid,
Yeah.
right? They don't give the government any aid in any case. And in fact, it is the credit for this goes to Dr. Manmohan Singh's government, which simply said that, look, India is too big and we don't need your aid anymore.
Which
and
we
in fact,
mentioned.
it goes even before that, when we said that even when there is a natural disaster in India, we don't need anything from anyone. We have our own capabilities and capacities. We can take care of our own people. So instead of, in the past, when we used to look for aid coming from outside, today we are actually the first responders when natural disasters take place anywhere in the world. So I think there is a huge change which has come in India. The problem is that many Indians realize it. Many don't, of course. Many don't, and many of those who don't realize it are those who are, the people who quote unquote receive the aid from the Brits. Their NGOs run on British aid. They are employed by some of these British quote unquote charities, which are mostly lobbying organizations.
Yeah.
They're trying to build up their own influence in India. But most of us who have nothing to do with all of this, we find it very galling when we hear this kind of stuff coming from the Brits, especially because it is dripping with ignorance about what the reality is. And for these guys to pretend that they've given aid, and as though that aid has been used for the Indian space mission, I mean, nothing can be further from the truth. It's utter rubbish what these guys are talking. And yet they think they're entitled to talk down to us, which I don't think many of us are ready to accept anymore.
Sushant Sareen, I appreciate your candor in such, on such subjects, and that's why I'm glad that you had the time to join me on my show. Very much appreciated. Thank you for being with me here. We will continue to put the spotlight on this ignorance that is displayed by sections of not just the niche media, but as Sushant clearly pointed out, it's the mainstream media, and in many ways, it should perhaps compel us to think about how we've been conditioned to regard Western media and their reputations. Remember, let's be very clear, there are fantastic, talented journalists in the BBC. This is by no means, to suggest that the entire organization is racist by any stretch of imagination. I have close friends in the BBC all over the world, but the fact is that it takes one little clip of this kind to make it seem like racism is part of the system. While the world and even the United Kingdom, for large part, applauds India for the stupendous achievement of being the first to land a spacecraft in the moon's South Pole region, this video clip from a BBC News broadcast in 2019 that you've just seen has gone totally viral. From 4 years ago, it's come back to go viral now. I'd like you to listen first once again to this video in case you missed it.
So, I'm going to have to ask you, because some people will be thinking about this. India, a country that lacks a lot of infrastructure, a country that has extreme poverty. I think more than 700 million Indians don't have access to a toilet. Really? Should they really be spending this sort of money on a space program?
Really, a country that doesn't have toilets, should they be putting a lander on the moon? That TV presenter is Aaron Hesselhurst, who's been a face of the BBC since 2002. You see how he leans back in his chair, the body language, one of total smugness, as he wonders why India, which doesn't have infrastructure or toilets, should be sending a spacecraft to the moon. You might argue that he's a journalist, of course, and it's his job to ask questions. But I argue back that what you've seen in this clip that's found new life on the internet 4 years after it was filmed is just how casual colonial sentiments and racism can actually be. It's this kind of condescending, smirking racism that so easily slips out. Aaron Hesselhurst is a professional. He may be one smirking BBC anchor, but he represents, in my view, a systemic racism that afflicts many sections of the Western media and clearly the mainstream media as well. If you look carefully enough, there are enough Aaron Hesselhursts out there, all sloppy enough to let their racism and prejudice and bigotry show. How dare India, with its grimy, naked children and starving families, land on the moon? With all its gargantuan problems, Who gave India the audacity to have a space program? Why doesn't India just shut up and stop dreaming about stuff that should be the preserve of a handful of Western countries? I'm not going to waste time schooling Aaron about the significance of a space program, but I do want to remind him and an entire class of casual bigots like him that even 76 years after the British left India, this country continues to fight to eradicate poverty. Of course, we have gigantic problems of our own making, including political corruption, bureaucracy, and endless other issues. But let Aaron and his smug compatriots across the UK and the Commonwealth and Australia know that Britain left India with a massive hole of stolen wealth. According to economist Utsa Patnaik, in a famous essay in 2018, the British drained out over $45 trillion worth of Indian wealth during the British Raj, which to this day, has hampered India's ability to come out of poverty. $45 trillion is nearly 17 times the annual GDP of the United Kingdom at this time. According to Utsa Patnaik, every year, the British siphoned off resources equivalent to 26 to 36% of the central government's budget, something that would have made a huge difference in India's journey towards being a developed nation had it been given that chance and not been plundered by the British Raj. Add to this taxation on food grains and the genocidal famines that were inflicted on India by so-called heroes like Winston Churchill, and this BBC anchor you just heard wants to know about toilets when India is landing on the moon. Thanks in large part to nearly 2 centuries of plunder, the war against poverty in India continues to be a crushing battle. It's not a joke, it's not a video clip. It is real. In a nation of this size and population, what the British took away from us left us not only with the paralyzing burden of recreating what was plundered from us, but also resuscitating and reviving a nation's stolen self-confidence and self-assurance. It's still a fight we have to fight. And I want to be clear. We've come a long way from blaming the British for our problems. This is a country where the energy that we have to question must be to question our current rulers and leaders. I only decided to share these thoughts with you and to bring up the British because of just how clearly prevalent this sickening easy racism and arrogance pervades even the mainstream popular media in the UK and beyond, including BBC World News. India has many miles to go before every Indian has a toilet and infrastructure we can all be proud of. There's no doubt about how much there is to achieve, but the effort is on. And if that's a source of frustration or irritation for those with a colonial hangover, tough. India isn't here to subsidize your sense of pain. Thanks for listening. Well, not only has the Western media mocked us continually when Chandrayaan-3 had failed in 2019, that's when the BBC clip you just heard was filmed, they very conveniently changed their stance when we succeeded in conquering the moon this week. India Today's Pooja Shali decodes this shift of tone in some sections of the Western media. Take a look. Very interesting.
Now, most foreign media carried Chandrayaan as the leading story on their portals. When during Chandrayaan-2 mission, I remember in 2019, communication was lost with the lander, the Washington Post had written, "The incident could now set back India's growing space ambitions, seen as a reflection of the aspirations of its young population," the article read. Today, the WAPO says, and I quote it here, "India becomes the first nation to land on moon's south pole." Let's talk about Al Jazeera. An article published by the Al Jazeera on 20th September 2019 was titled, "The sun is setting on Vikram lander but not on Chandrayaan-2," and then a satire tone adds, "Despite the September 7 loss of the lander, India's ambition to become a spacefaring nation endeavoring to exploit the moon's water and mineral riches has not cooled down, but it has become more difficult to realize." The article even hinted at a theory that India is trying to make up for India not being a permanent member of the United Nations yet, and therefore it stated, I quote it here, India, which conducted its first nuclear arms test in 1974, still feels the sting of being a nuclear weapons-capable nation of 1.3 billion people and yet not being made into a UN Security Council permanent member. I wonder who feels the sting today. Because today, published by the Al Jazeera, a stark change in the tone was noticed. India lands Chandrayaan-3 craft on moon, asserting its place in the space tech, describing India as a country with growing prowess in space and technology.
And Pooja has been looking very, very closely at how the Western media has been reporting these things because of those hypocrisies and U-turns which she frequently picks up on. Pooja, you've been tracking the global coverage of the Chandrayaan-3 success as well. And I note that in your latest episode of Homeland, which, by the way, viewer, goes up on our YouTube channel of India Today every day at 8 p.m., you've picked up, a sudden U-turn, an about-face. What's changed, Pooja?
I did find a lot of interesting snippets in how the international media reported about India's Chandrayaan-3 success, specifically how they had reported earlier. I remember in 2014 when India's Mars orbiter mission was a success. It could have just been acknowledged simply, but the New York Times had uploaded a cartoon which showed poor Indian scientists with their cows knocking on the door of the elite space club. After a lot of uproar, NYT had to apologize. And today in 2023, the headline in NYT said, India is on the moon. German newspaper Der Spiegel had put forth a cartoon when India had become the most populous country with an old train which is overcrowded, overpacked and taking over a sleek bullet train of China. That was their take. A lot of Indians felt it was demeaning, that it had unnecessary old stereotype to show a backward living in India. The same newspaper has now reported India rejoices as a country that has managed to land on the moon. So there were several examples like this. It was all positive reporting mostly that I noticed, but considering that every little mistake or a setback of India was prominently displayed, it was very interesting to see whether we call it a U-turn, whether we call it perhaps realizing that India is a rising power. And we did have setbacks, but the manner in which it was reported so extensively earlier and now the praise shows Isro has put out a lesson to continue, but also Shiva, I think we'll be glorious in this glory of ours, we'll be gracious and we'll continue to maintain and work hard as a country.
We'll be gracious, but we will not stop short of pointing out the hypocrisies in the West, mind you. This is a completely different India that the sections of the Western media and Western politics appear to think that India is stuck in. That's sadly for them not the case.